check out my novel, The Pilates Workshop, on Amazon. Greetings. My name is Michael Miller, and this is a Michael Miller trademark broadcast out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, my patrons Clayton, Ruby, Stephanie, and Jonathan, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor. I have 3 titles today in my broadcast subjects. One is a quote from the web at the bottom of an article on Pilates for newbies, oddly enough, and maybe not so oddly, but the title of this article that I didn't click on, but the title of the article was "The Best Pilates Exercises for Every Part of the Body." So, it's like, alright, here's Pilates, these exercises, which one do you want for what part of the body? And it's human nature, I guess, to come from the issue that you have and pulling what you want. What you want is a resolution to your issue, and so you pull whatever it is that will resolve that issue. And when it comes to Pilates, you want Pilates, you want the best Pilates exercises for every part of the body. So it's like, here's the part of the body I want to address. What are the Pilates exercises I take out of the dictionary to address those parts? And that just is so uncharacteristic of what you're reaching for when you do Pilates because of number 2, because you're trying to, Contrology develops the body uniformly, and it is in the pursuit of whole body that all of the issues either dissolve or they don't. But if Pilates has something to offer you, it's in the pursuit of not the part of the body, but the ability to actually engage in Pilates, to work, to move in a whole body way. And it's from movement in that whole body way that you end up with a Pilates body. Number 2, the title is Be able to tell the cake from the frosting. Be able to tell the cake from the frosting. Now, in my opinion, and it's just mine, and hopefully through the point of view of MMP, Pilates is the cake. We know of as Pilates is the cake. What's in here? Joe's definition and his statement about whole body and his sequence, the exercises, that's the cake. So I'm reaching for this fleeting communication. Oh, in terms of, okay, hold on. In discerning cake from frosting, one lens you might look through is patterns. Patterns. Like patterns of movement. So if you think of your body restricted to flexion and extension within the plane of the midline, that means just the plane that divides you in two, left to right, okay? If all you could do is move in that plane, compared to being able not only to move in one plane, but the other plane 90 degrees and then rotate in all of that. I'm setting myself to argue with the example I was trying to work through, because in 3D space that we have to play with, as with a student in their movement, the planes of flexion, extension, side bending, and rotation occupy 3D space, or define, perhaps, 3D space. Frosting is something you add to what is already there of substance. Okay? Pilates definitely has a cake comparison to it, because it is there, and just eating this, right, is the substance. At least you might be after, if you're after the MMP point of view of what Pilates is. Pilates is the cake. Where do I go with this? In Pilates, compared to other modalities, that may be considered frosting rather than cake, because the thing is, as Pilates unfolded, it ended up being in the public domain in terms of being able to say what it is. It's just a word that describes something, and anybody can say whatever they want to about what it is. I want you to be aware that Pilates started with, I would say, really the philosophy in Schiller, and then it expressed itself out in through Joe. And I don't mean to, Joe is the method, Joe is the titan. Joe represents a choreography that will never be eclipsed. And because of its nature will never be other than what it already is. That's why my advice as a newbie was to get Joe's book, because that's the basis of whatever anybody else will make out of it. In Pilates, it came from the mat work, and equipment evolved to facilitate the performance of the mat. I know at least one other modality that started with a piece of equipment, and then a whole modality grew out of that piece of equipment, and that identity that was something that could be distinguished legally between this modality and whatever this whole big world of Pilates is. Okay? What matters to me that I want you to know is that Pilates addresses reality at the fundamental level of flexion, extension, side bending, rotation, and torsion. And so it's no surprise that that is mirrored in any of the other modalities that you see, because it's fundamental to the human experience. I think what I want to say is that in MMP, body, mind, and spirit is being, thinking, and observing. And without that's what makes Pilates what it is, regardless of what other people or how other people define themselves or their modalities. Be they ancient arts, martial or shamanistic, or contemporary science. Be able to tell the cake from the frosting. And just because the frosting is fancy and privately presented as its own frosting, recognize that regardless of where or how modalities claim their foundations, the MMP point of view comes from three things out of Joe's book, and then points to Yoda points to a sensation that you either find or you don't, have or you don't, find as a sensation or not. So I dug a lot of holes on that one. Buy my novel. That's why it's up on top of my comments that you don't see because you're on YouTube. My novel, The Pilates Workshop, by moi. And read the Pilatesology interview I was requested to submit, and then the comments that follow thereafter, and take that as the lesson I learned not to submit what you can't, or be careful who you submit what to, or read the message parts and take the messenger parts with a spoon, with whatever regard you have for them. Judge the cake on the cake, not the baker. That's true of Joe and of me. Number 3, ghosts and mirages. So here in my YouTube following someday, on Facebook, I get a notice that a person I know is watching? Do I want to invite them into the conversation? And I usually don't, for anybody. And yet, at the end of my broadcast, whether I've invited them, whether the invitation to invite has come up or not, at the end of a broadcast, it will say that this person was part of my broadcast. And so it was like a ghost. And so by a ghost, I mean someone who's watching that you don't see. Okay? And I know there are other uses of the word ghosting and such that are similar but not the same thing. And then mirages are something you see that isn't really there. And when I think as a Pilates instructor, given that you listen to what I'm saying, you have the clothes on of being able to explain what it is and what it's about beyond just an improvisation mostly based on this book. Now, some methods that are tightly held and controlled and around equipment that came first and then repertoire came after. See? Elizabeth Berkeley's comment about the push-through bar on the Cadillac. She says, the push-through bar is no friend of mine. And wisely spoken. And in that regard, and for the same reason, what other piece of equipment could be looked at the same way in the studio, a regular classical Pilates studio? The low chair, right? Why? Because both of them are levers, rigid levers, anchored at one end. Right? They're both like nutcrackers or bone breakers, like forearm breakers. The push-through is no friend of you as an instructor, and how much can go wrong when engaged in tension. That's where a lever is part of it. How did I get off on that? Because I'm talking about, I'm talking about mirages. And that exercise you see in the Cadillac all the time, with the push, this different subject altogether. And yet, probably feeds into that same notion. The push-through bar is a lever. And when you put your feet on the rising poles and roll up and lift your hips up and go into extension, making a high bridge based on holding on to a rigid lever, puts the physics of the body, the weight of the body, I feel, at risk in a way that anything else in the Pilates world doesn't really do. So as much as that has so much drama in it and everybody says, oh, I can control it and I love the way it makes me feel and everything, all of that's great. But in the MMP point of view, it's not Pilates-esque because of the way the loading is involved. And because of the vulnerability of losing, the vulnerability of what happens when you lose your ability to maintain your load, the load of your body. Blah, blah. So also on social media this morning, I saw a comment about I'm too busy making magic to care about what other people are thinking. That's heartening for all of us, right? And as that regards to me, I'm too busy here making magic, hopefully pointing to the magic you make as a Pilates instructor when you help your student coordinate their being, thinking, and observing as a state of being in the body, in the moment of the doing. In MMP, that's where it all starts. And everything else after that is derivative. Now, that's just a point of view. But look at what's in Joe's original book. Ask yourself if you find some kind of sensation or experience in doing Pilates that you connect to. And then look at the MMP point of view that tries to take 3 things that's written in Joe's book and develop a theory that there's an ideal within Joe's original work. See, the mat has to be the method, because without the performance of the mat, there is no reflection of its meaning in the reality that it's occurring in the space that it's happening in. So much of Pilates is about pursuit of that choreography. Not an improvisation off of it. The better that you can perform the original work, the more it shows. I'm thinking of an international karate competition I went to as an observer, and I'm thinking of that in light of a person doing a prescribed sequence of movements, and that the degree of control is apparent between individual performances. That's what the tournament's all about. Part of it, right? In Pilates, there's just one kata, and it's the expression of it for its own sake is the primary benefit that comes out of it. See, that comes out of it. See, that's the point. Is that what you are after and dive for into the moment that you're in? Reaching for what? For control. The whole essence of Pilates is to go towards the fundamental. Express control as purely and ideally as you can. Right? Whatever comes out of that moment in that pursuit is all really good stuff that can can be used like clay. Mr. Rogers and clay was a fascinating broadcast. Life can't live forever. So model in the clay while you can, what you can. And enjoy it. And from my point of view, recognize the thrill of participating as a Pilates instructor. Now I know you know what that is and already have the thrill in hand. MMP is just a way to explain what makes it what it is. It gives an answer to why it is what it is. And in much of the frosting that's out there, let alone other modalities altogether, there's an essence to cake that doesn't exist in the frosting. There's a substance, yes, in the cake that isn't in the frosting. And when you understand the ideal within Joe's original work, that's the cake. And everything else is frosting. You may want to eat the frosting first, like I do. But if you're an actual baker, as an instructor, a Pilates instructor, baking the cake of your student, meaning interacting with them and trying to deliver Pilates, the cake, right? The better you know the cake, the more whatever frosting you hang on it will taste. That's good. That's a good thing. Just thought that up. The better you make your cake, the better the frosting will taste, because the cake holds up the frosting. Read between the lines, see behind the curtain, evaluate points of view, then add 2 and 2, direct your thinking. Geist.